The Denver Broncos face a short turnaround this week as they prepare for Saturday's matchup in primetime against the Detroit Lions. We'll take a look at what they have to do on offense and defense in order to come away with the victory. You're going to get that preview and much more on today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
It is Detroit Lions week here as the Broncos shift their focus in preparation for Saturday's matchup against Dan Campbell, Jared Goff, and a wide variety of different players who could have an impact against Denver's playoff hopes. We'll break it all down in today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much to everybody in Broncos Country for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day every single day. And a special shout out to all the everydayers out there in Broncos Country. Just a reminder, you can get this podcast for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. So please do us a favor, hit that subscribe or that follow button if you've not done so already, so you never miss out on a day's worth of Broncos news, content, coverage, and more every single day, all year long. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports, joined alongside, as always, by Sayre, Bedinger, site expert, predominantlyorange.com. The Detroit Lions, now, they're not coming to town. Denver's coming to town in the Motor City for a showdown with the MCDC Dan Campbell-led Detroit Lions, who've obviously been a very good story. I think when you look at this 2023 Broncos team, you look at the 2022 Detroit Lions, there are a lot of similar parallels in terms of their stories, their struggles, and a little bit of a rise here. Now, ultimately, that led to the Detroit Lions last year going 9-8, missing out on the playoffs. Denver has a chance here to maybe change it, though, and go out and get a playoff berth here. But they're going to have to win, obviously, on Saturday. It'll help them in a major, major way with 3 AFC games remaining after that here. So Saturday's game, Sayre. It's massive.
It is. I mean, with a win, the Broncos playoff odds could jump back over 60% again. I know that was kind of the case going into that Houston game, and hopes were dashed a little bit after that Houston game. But look, when you win in the NFL, good things happen for you. You're able to kind of control your own destiny in a way. And so I think to put yourself in that position, although Detroit is not an AFC opponent, to win this game and get those playoff odds up potentially over 60%, that would be a huge, huge help going into those final 3 games of the season. But this Detroit team, they started off white hot. Every Broncos fan was an honorable Detroit Lions fan in the very first game of the year. Remember, they opened up the season against the Kansas City Chiefs and got that victory. They went on the road and Kansas City got a win, and everybody seems to like rooting for this Detroit Lions team, Cody. Of course, nobody else in the NFC North really cares that they're having fun and having success, but I think everyone outside of the NFC North has been watching the Lions with a lot of intrigue this year because of that coaching job that Dan Campbell has been doing. Unfortunately, now for Detroit, they've met a bit of adversity over the last month. This team was red hot in the first half of the season, and since their bye week, they've had a lot of struggles. They have not been playing nearly as good of football lately as we saw in the first half of the season, where it felt like, man, they were really close to only losing 1 game before their bye week. They had an overtime loss against Seattle. Like, they were playing dominant football. But the last month has told a vastly different story, and this team is kind of reeling right now.
It's been a little interesting, and it started off with that Thanksgiving loss to the Green Bay Packers, which made the Broncos win against Green Bay a little bit more spicy. And look, if Denver wins on Saturday, they'll have swept the entire NFC North division. So that's a good mark on their record. We talk also about like tiebreakers. I know yesterday's show, we dove deep into Denver being 1 game out of the AFC West. Right now, in terms of their wins, they've got more wins against tougher opponents than the Chiefs have. And that gives them the strength of schedule advantage when we talk about in terms of their win percentage there. But, you know, I agree. I don't know what's going on with the Detroit Lions. I know Aaron Glenn, their defensive coordinator, who the Broncos at one point interviewed for their vacant head coaching job before, if I'm not mistaken, was it before Sean Payton or was it before Hackett? I remember he was in one of those searches there. I'm not sure if it was this past year. Okay, so it was the Hackett year. So, yeah, their defense, they have talent. Like, they have talent on the defensive side of the ball, but they're struggling as of late. You mentioned it here. They're allowing over close to 30 points per game since their bye week. So over the course of the last 5 weeks, they allowed 28 points to the Chicago Bears this past Sunday in a game where they lost 28-13. And look, this was a game too. This was on the early morning game. So I had a chance to sit down and watch it. And Sayre, to be honest with you, it looked very weird to see Detroit start out the way they did. I don't know if Chicago all of a sudden just found new life. Justin Fields is playing really good football. They're just capitalizing here. But that Detroit defense made some mistakes. They jumped on a fourth down play. I think it was 4th and 13. It was a free play. And then obviously Justin Fields connected for a wide open touchdown with a wide receiver to give them an extended lead in this game. Chicago got up early on 10-0 against them, but they had 3 turnovers in this game. They had 8 penalties go against them, and they were 6 of 15 on third down, which is 40%. They went for it on fourth down quite a bit. Yesterday's show, it kind of alluded to it. Third down for them is like second down. Fourth down to them is like third down. Well, on fourth down, they were 1 of 5 in Sunday's loss, where they just simply couldn't swing back against the Chicago Bears. But I will say the one area where they did well in this game in particular, and it's going to have to be something that Denver keeps an eye on here, they had 140 yards rushing on the ground. They have a really good offensive line. As we've known, obviously, Frank Ragnow's been injured for them. We'll see if he's back in the mix for them this week. But 140 yards on the ground, that is the strength of their offense right now. And Denver's going to have to find a way to counteract that. But I think there's a formula here, right? Looking at Detroit, I see a lot of things that the Broncos can do here against the Lions on the road to potentially get another victory and play spoils to where the Lions are at and contribute to the struggles that they're already going through.
Yeah, they've given up a lot through the air. I mean, you talked about that the Justin Fields to DJ Moore connection was on point this past week, and they actually almost lost 2 games to the Bears within a couple weeks' time. If memory serves, they had to complete kind of a miraculous comeback in the fourth quarter to beat Chicago in Detroit. So they've given up a lot against the Packers. I mean, I think we were all kind of shocked to see Green Bay spreading the ball around, kind of just picking their spots against that Detroit defense. But what's really been a difference over the last month, I would say, Cody, is turning the ball over quite a bit more. They do have a victory against the New Orleans Saints in the last 4 weeks. But other than that, including that game against the Chicago Bears that I alluded to, 10 turnovers in the last 4 games for this Detroit offense, which, I mean, they're coming in bunches. They had 3 turnovers this past Sunday against Chicago. They had 3 turnovers on Thanksgiving and 4 turnovers against the Bears before that. So a lot of turnovers, a lot of sloppy play. Like you said, they're not connecting on all their fourth downs. I know Dan Campbell loves to do that, even when he's in opponent territory. Like even when he's pinned deep, they go for it on fourth down. That's just kind of who they are. It's a very, very interesting skid that the Lions are on right now. So you kind of feel like at any point in time, yes, that dominant offense could show back up and they can score 40 at any time. That's kind of who the Lions have become. But also, it kind of feels like the Broncos may be catching them at a really good time.
Well, not to mention Jared Goff was sacked 4 times this past week, and Denver's going to have an opportunity to dial up some pressure. There's some things we'll look at here, but what does Denver's offense have to do this week against the Detroit Lions defense? That's something that Sayre and myself, we're going to dive deep into here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's Locked On Broncos podcast is brought to you by our friends over there at FanDuel Sportsbook. FanDuel is America's number one sportsbook, as you all know. And as the weather gets colder, the NFL offers to stay hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers, they can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. If you put $5 on the Tennessee Titans to win against the Miami Dolphins on Monday Night Football on the money line, well, you woke up with $150 in bonus bets. I don't know how many people actually had that happen, but it is one of those things that you can get on the action on at FanDuel Sportsbook. That's $150 if your team wins. And if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action than right now. With the NFL season approaching playoff time, the NBA season and NHL season in full effect, FanDuel is the place to be. The app is super easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, where the Denver Broncos in this week's matchup against the Detroit Lions on Saturday are 4.5-point road underdogs. Can the Broncos go out on top as road dogs? We'll see if they can do it here once again. They have player props, they have over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. Once again, FanDuel.com/lockedon to kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL.
It's got to be touchdowns, not field goals, if the Denver Broncos offense wants to beat the Detroit Lions this weekend. We're going to break down what exactly the offense has to do well in order to come away with their 8th win of the season this year. But we want to say thank you and give a shout out to all of you that make Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day. Every single day, wherever and however you choose to listen to podcasts. You know, the show is always free and available however you do that, as well as you can watch the show on YouTube, where you can interact with other members of Broncos Country in the comment section. And we appreciate every single one of you that takes the time to do that, to like the show, subscribe, and do all of those different things that make the show what it is. So we appreciate every single one of you tuning in right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Cody, the offense for the Denver Broncos, I mean, against a team like Detroit that can score points in bunches, you got to expect that you're maybe not going to be able to win this game by scoring only 17 points or something like that. It's going to be the potential of a shootout, or the potential of explosive offense at any point coming from Detroit's side. But what does the Broncos offense have to do against this Detroit defense, in your opinion, in order to come away with a win?
I think a big thing, and look, this is something I think every week when you play against a very good defense. I mean, look, their defense is struggling; they're allowing points, but they're still very good. They still have very good players. I think pass rush is probably one of the biggest things you have to have your eye on. Now, for me, okay, well, who is Denver facing this week? They're facing Aiden Hutchinson, who's got an unbelievable motor. I mean, Sarah, when you watch this guy play, he is constantly just relentless effort. I don't like saying that he's going to be a comparison to J.J. Watt, but when you watch a guy with a high motor and the power and the physicality, Aiden Hutchinson is very damn good. And he's got a really good strong arm on a bull rush that he can do, that he sometimes tries to catch offensive tackles with. The way that they create some stunt designs allow him to get inside the tackle or the guard. And especially if there's a miscommunication between the guard. Look, if Quinn Miner's unable to play this week, they may try to exploit Luke Wattenberg, who doesn't have a lot of NFL experience. They might try to get the Broncos to have some miscommunication issues on the offensive line. Aiden Hutchinson is the most dangerous man. Now, granted, Denver just faced Khalil Mack, who is the NFL sack leader. Hutchinson obviously had a sack last week. While the defense is struggling, he's still a very dominant player against the run. He's a pressure creator. And I think Denver's game plan from a protection standpoint this week is going to have to be very similar. And also, I got to give a shout out to Alex Anzalone. I mean, at the linebacker position for Detroit, this is a guy who, when I watch him on tape, he is a high motor, relentless player. They love to send him on pressure looks as well. He's good against the run. He's another player that the Broncos are going to have to account for here in this game on Sunday. I think protecting against the pass rush is probably going to be the most important thing, in my opinion, here for what Denver has to do to control what Detroit is trying to do. That's one of my bigger things. What do you have in mind?
Well, I think it's a great point that you call out there, and the Broncos have had some success in terms of, especially I think after that first game of the season where Max Crosby was such a problem. You know, you go back to the drawing board and you kind of figure out, hey, what do we have to do against teams that have such a good individual edge player? And in recent weeks, you know, we've seen the Broncos do well against Cleveland Browns and Myles Garrett. We saw them do exceptionally well on Sunday as well, going up against Khalil Mack and the Chargers. So maybe Aiden Hutchinson is going to be in for a similar kind of game plan. I think that's, you know, for the Broncos, you got to play mistake-free football. Like, the Lions have lost 2 of their last 3 games. The common denominator in those 2 games is that, well, number one, their offense was turning the ball over, but number 2, they didn't force any turnovers either. So not only are you losing the turnover battle, you're not even creating any opportunities for the offense. You're not helping them out at all defensively. So they've given up 29.8 points per game since their bye week, Cody, which is over the last 5 weeks. So they're on a bit of a streak here of the defense being susceptible. But like you said, when you have talent like that on that side of the ball, you can't necessarily bank on them being the worst version of themselves. You have to assume that they're going to be the best version of themselves, rushing the passer, playing fast, causing problems for your offense. But look, this is a team where the Broncos, they need to take advantage. I said it at the beginning of this segment: touchdowns, not field goals. The Lions ranked 29th in the NFL in red zone percentage. That is a clear area the Broncos have to cash in, Cody. When they have good sustained drives, you've got to find ways to punch the ball in and not have to settle for field goals instead of touchdowns.
I'll go the cliche route here on today's episode of the show. I'll say, I think another thing is Denver's third down area of emphasis needs to continue to improve. They didn't get off to a great start against the Chargers, but then they were able to kind of balance it out in the fourth quarter, obviously with a great last drive. Can Denver be more consistent going forward here on third down? I think that's a big thing that we need to keep an eye on. Now, when I look at the overall stats from when Detroit played the Chicago Bears this past week, and you look at Chicago on third down, they converted at a rate of 6 of 14. So, I mean, it wasn't as great as where you're looking at in terms of where the Detroit Lions were at in terms of statistics. The Chicago went for it on fourth down twice. They were 1 of 2, which is 50%. So they had a 43% on third down there. And I think more importantly for Denver this week, especially being on the road, is when you do get in these third down situations. And I thought against the Houston Texans, they did a pretty good job of this, even though they went 0 for 11. They were third and manageable. They weren't like third and long. It'd be different if we were talking about Denver faced consistent third and 10s, third and 8s. Denver was in third and 2s, third and 3s, third and 4s. So I think part of it's going to have to be where Denver has to be a little bit more efficient. As cliche as it is, what does that look like? Well, I mean, the reality is Denver goes back to the struggles we've talked about with them having a little bit of inconsistency running the football to the outside. I think there are times where everybody anticipates they're going to run the ball inside on third down. Like teams think that, but they play good edge contain. And so when Denver does go to the outside, safeties and nickels and your corners, they come up and they find a way to make a play, and they stop the Broncos short of the sticks. Now, they can't do that going forward. Detroit, they're dangerous right now, in my opinion. They got their backs against the wall, and that defense, they're going to try to unload some pressure after Russell Wilson in this offense, and they're going to try to shut down the run here. But I think Denver's going to have to make the most of their opportunities on third down. And heck, you know what? It'd be great if you didn't find yourself in a position where you had 15, 16 third down attempts. Can Denver be efficient overall in this game is my biggest question, especially in that department where that's been a little bit of a concern for them over the course of the last few weeks.
Yeah, and you don't necessarily want to see them be conservative to the point of being like, "Hey, we're afraid to lose this game," right? But you need to see them
100%.
play really smart, right? They have to play smart. You kind of have to when you're playing against Detroit, and I've watched a lot of their games this year, Cody, because like I said, I'm very intrigued by this team. You kind of have to match their aggressiveness in a way without being reckless, right? Because Detroit is aggressive to the point of, hey, that can get us into trouble sometimes, but it's our identity. It's who we are. We kind of live with the results, and the results have been mostly good. But teams that are going up against Detroit, you kind of have to match that aggressiveness without being reckless, right? And so I think that's where the Broncos kind of find themselves. The Broncos win when they're conservative. They win when they're playing ball control. They win when they're running the ball well. You have to kind of find ways to mix in the best versions like we've seen when the Broncos are able to attack the ball downfield, having a lot of success with that. I know not every pass has been reeled in, but they're having a lot of success attacking downfield. Keep that aggressiveness, but also be calculated with it. You got to match Detroit's aggressiveness to a degree, but without being reckless.
Balance and everything, because the NFL is played at such a high rate of speed and things change it, at any given moment. It's always easier to evaluate it after the fact, right? But I think that's the beauty of football, is that everything happens in real time. It happens. There's no thinking about it. It's just, this is our play. We are either going to hear Russell Wilson say, kill, 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 and they're going to do something else. But the reality is you're going to see the results there and the whole process of how this game is played between offenses and defenses. It's exciting. It's something I don't think a lot of people understand, but that's why we tune in every single weekend, whether it's going to be this Saturday night when Denver takes on the Lions or whether when it's Denver plays on Sundays. There's a lot at stake here for this Broncos team in this matchup here, and the offense is going to have to play big in this matchup in order to come out with a victory here on Saturday. I keep wanting to say Sunday. It's Saturday night, 6:15 p.m. Mountain Time kickoff on NFL Network. You can also get it locally on local channels if you are in the Denver area. Plus, you can always expect a Lockdown Broncos postgame report courtesy of Sayre, Bedinger, and myself. One thing we are going to dive deep into, though, what does the Broncos defense need to do against Jared Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and the two-headed monster that they have at the running back position? We'll dive deeper into that here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's Locked On Broncos podcast is brought to you by our friends over there at PrizePicks. And as you all know it, PrizePicks is daily fantasy sports done right. They make it easy to get involved. PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They're the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS because it's just you against the numbers here. PrizePicks is the most fun that I've had, winning up to 25 times my money this football season. You just select two or more players, you pick more or less on their projected stats, and then you place your entry. With basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League. It was a league created specifically for combo projections that includes 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. For example, LeBron James plus Travis Kelce had a 10.5 combo of 3-pointers made plus receptions. If you want to play alongside a PrizePicks, favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Scholes, you can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries from some of the biggest names in the PrizePicks community each week. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Once again, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. As we jump into the fourth quarter action on today's episode, Locked On Broncos, free and available everywhere you get your podcast, or if you're watching us on YouTube, we just want to say thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be an everyday listener, or if you make us your first listen of the day every single day. We appreciate you so much. Everybody in Broncos country, you make the show exactly what it is, and we're very thankful for the community that some of you have helped us build here on the podcast. So we're super grateful for you. Aside from all that there, the Broncos defense, they're going to have their hands full a little bit this week against the Detroit Lions offense led by Jared Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and a 2-headed rushing attack that is very, very good and explosive and can change the course of a game at any given moment. The Broncos defense, what do they have to do, Sayre, on Saturday against the Detroit Lions in order to have the best chance to win here?
Well, I think it starts with stopping that run, right? Obviously, that's one of the strengths of this Detroit Lions offense. It's not one-dimensional by any means. They can attack you in a variety of different ways, but man, when they are running the ball well, and when teams in general are running the ball well against the Denver Broncos, it's been bad news for this team. Like, the Broncos have not had a ton of games where you can point to this season as having a lot of success defending against the run. Now, I think Houston was an example where they did pretty solid against the run, but other than that, I mean, Cody, even amidst that winning streak, I mean, the Bills game stands out as one to me where their ability to run the ball almost cost the Broncos the game. Same with that Vikings game. You could look at any number of games that the Broncos have played this season to where the running game has absolutely gashed them. So they are going to have to make sure they're not missing tackles. They're going to make sure they're not over pursuing. They're going to have to make sure they're taking the right angles and that they're getting a push at the line of scrimmage. Mike Purcell has had a few really good games in a row. I know we don't get a chance to highlight him a lot on this show, but I think he's been really key the last couple weeks to the Broncos being able to force teams to throw the ball. He's getting a good push up the middle of the field, but I think it starts with stopping the run as much as you possibly can, making sure that the Lions, I mean, I know they can throw it, but you want the ball in Jared Goff's hands in this game.
And I think that's where our next key kind of comes up big here for Denver. I think the key, as we said, he was sacked 4 times this past week. You have to pressure Jared Goff. He's going to be one of the least mobile quarterbacks that the Broncos face this upcoming week and that they've faced so far this season. And look, we talked about how hard it was going into that Chargers game. Justin Herbert, one of the least sacked quarterbacks in the NFL. Denver was able to get 4 sacks on him in the first quarter. So I'm very curious, playing against a non-mobile quarterback like Goff, what is Denver's plan? What is Vance Joseph planning? Because we know he's going to send pressure. He's going to send looks, but it's been calculated as of late in terms of how they're sending it, and Denver's been able to uphold. I mean, I don't even think people realize on the PJ Locke sack on 4th and 19, they also blitzed Patrick Surtain at the cornerback spot too on that very play. I don't know if a lot of people caught that. So for me, it's okay. Denver's coming off of a performance defensively against Easton Stick, Justin Herbert, where they accumulated 6 sacks by 6 different players. You're going to have to do that here once again on the road indoors against Jared Goff and them. Now, look, maybe you can make an argument for the Detroit Lions. They played in cold, not so favorable positions last week against Chicago. Did that have anything to do with it? Maybe, maybe not. We know this for a fact. The Detroit Lions offensive line, it's pretty dang good. Even without Frank Ragnow, they have good players. Former Bronco Graham Glasgow. You have Penei Sewell, who's obviously an impact player for them. It's a line that is built to sustain, to protect, and also to run the football as effectively as they do. And if Denver is able to take away or limit the explosiveness in the run game between David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, who combined for 132 yards, both of them, I think one had 11 carries for 66 yards, one had 10 carries for 66 yards in Sunday's game against the Lions. If you can kind of eliminate that threat and prohibit them from rushing for more than 120 yards in this game combined, Denver is going to have a really good chance to ramp up the pressure there on Jared Goff, which, as we know, as of late, they've turned the ball over. You mentioned 10 times, and I think in the last 4 games, that will lead to Jared Goff trying to get the ball out of his hands quickly, which could lead to guys making plays in the secondary here for the Broncos. That's going to be a huge key for them. But they also have explosive players at wide receiver. And once again, I think they have balance across the board with Amon-Ra St. Brown. Josh Reynolds is having a good year for them. Sam Laporta is a legitimate threat at the tight end position for the Detroit Lions. And then they even have Donovan Peoples-Jones and former Bronco Khalif Raymond, who's not only a threat in terms of speed inside the slot, he's also a threat in the return game that Denver's going to have to account for. Limiting the explosives is going to be very key this week here for Denver's defense.
And this is where the chess match really comes into play, because it's not just that these guys are getting open on scramble drill all the time and Jared Goff sitting back there knitting sweaters behind that O-line and just allowing them to get open. What's happening is that Ben Johnson does a great job of designing plays to get all these guys explosives. He does a great job of involving them at different times in the game. And Jared Goff does a good job going through his progressions and making sure that, he is hitting the open guy for the most part, right? We know he struggled a little bit lately, but for the most part, he's been good at that and allowing those playmakers to go and make plays. That's why the Broncos coverage unit is going to have to be on point in this game. And Vance Joseph, the film study, the scheme, the plan, it's going to have to be on point as well. I mean, for lack of a better term there, you're going to have to make sure that you find ways to cause Jared Goff to be confused immediately at the snap. Like, why is my primary read not there? And then when he tries to get out of the pocket, that's where you've won as a defensive coordinator, because if Jared Goff is having to escape, if he's having to try to avoid pressure, you've already won, because you've taken away his primary read and you've probably taken away his secondary read, and you're forcing him to have to make a play. And if Jared Goff has to go make plays, Cody, that's where I think that the Lions can get themselves into a lot of trouble, because he's not a playmaking quarterback to me. He's an on-schedule quarterback, and there's nothing wrong with that. He's made a great living off of it, and he's helped the Lions be really good from it. But if you force him to have to make plays, I think it plays into Denver's defensive favor.
No, we're eager to see how the Broncos find a way to get after and create pressure on Goff here this Saturday in Broncos Country. We want to know what you think the Broncos defense needs to do here in this game on Saturday against the Lions in order to have the best chance to win. If you're watching on YouTube, drop it in the comments. If you're listening wherever you get your podcast, make sure you send us a blurb on social media at Cody Roark NFL, at Sayre Bedinger, at Locked On Broncos. But that'll wrap up today's episode of the show here on the Locked On Podcast Network. For all you everydayers out there, one thing you can expect for tomorrow's episode of the show, Sayre's going to sit down with the Locked On Lions host to break down Saturday's primetime action, 6:15 p.m. Mountain Time on the NFL Network. You can expect that on tomorrow's episode of the show.